afternoon. My name is John Dailey. I'm the first Vice President of the Tiger Bay Club. I will be your Master of Ceremonies for today. Let me be the first to welcome you to the February 2018 show, and I guarantee you a show that we will not forget. I got to tell you, I am so impressed and honored to have you here today. And quite frankly, because it's the Capital Tiger Bay Club, I got a little surprise for you. You see, well, last night at 8 o'clock, I went and had your face tattooed on my back. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not kidding. I have Roger Stone's face tattooed on my back. Anybody want to see it? Let me hear it. Yeah. Let me hear it. Let me hear it. I really need to hear it. And let it begin. Ladies and gentlemen, to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. John Clark. John?
Well, right away, I'm violating one of Tiger Bay's major rules. You never want to follow John Dailey. So, Mr. Stone, you're lucky that I'm an interlude in between that act and what we expect from you. We are noted for several things at Tiger Bay in introductions. We change facts. We alter perceptions, and sometimes we just make things up. Mr. Stone, sir, you will fit right in. Roger Stone has led a many-faceted political life. Been a campaign functionary, a manager, a fixer, pioneered the use of dirty tricks in campaigns, and he comes in handy when a campaign is in trouble. While right here in Tallahassee, as John said a while ago, is where Jim Baker uttered that famous line in a strategy meeting during the 2000 vote recount cluster thing, when he said, "Get me Roger Stone." When he got Roger Stone, the next thing you know, there was a demonstration in Palm Beach called the Brooks Brothers Riot that he may want to explain a little bit more. That line, as John said, is also the title of a fascinating documentary about Mr. Stone, and I highly recommend it. Roger was affiliated with President Nixon's campaigns in the 60s while he was a student, then Reagan's, as well as Trump's, and numerous other Republicans in many capacities, most of which cannot be revealed while law enforcement officers are still in the room and the statute of limitations has not yet expired. He was accused of frequenting swinger sex clubs, which he first denied because he didn't want his grandma to know. This is true. But later, after she had gone on to her greater reward, decided it enhanced his reputation and admitted it was true. He's written many men's fashion articles, and as you can see, is a natty dresser. Has over 100 silver-colored ties, never seen out of a suit and usually a hat, unless he's slumming in a pair of shorts and a gel Hillary t-shirt. And by the way, he considers single vent suits the work of Satan. Mr. Stone has written extensively on political controversies and is not shy about who had Kennedy killed. He does not reveal the killer in his book, but he entices us with the killer's initials, LBJ. He has written about the Clinton war on women and asserts that the Bush family is a criminal enterprise. He has a set of rules that govern his personal and political life. Some of them are predictable, like losers don't legislate, admit nothing, deny everything, and then launch a counterattack. Also, never miss the opportunity to be on television or have sex. Well, we're taking care of the former, Roger. The latter is going to be up to you. Today, Mr. Stone is an agent provocateur residing in South Florida. His office is decorated with dozens of Richard Nixon political posters, one of which he bought from my collection several years ago. There are just so many ways that Roger Stone is the perfect embodiment of a Tiger Bay program. that I dare not infringe on his time telling us how great he is. He's going to take care of that, I'm sure. Tiger Bay, I give you Roger Stone.
All right.
Thank you so much. Well, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. I'm delighted to be with you. I'm very impressed with the long record of distinctive and important individuals who have addressed you, and I am grateful for your invitation. I just came back from the United Kingdom where I spoke to the Oxford Union, the Durham Union Society, and the Cambridge Union. Let me say right off the bat, the food in Tallahassee is much better. And one of the British newspapers had a headline on an interview that I gave saying, "The man who made Donald Trump." Well, while I appreciate and I'm flattered by that title, let me be very clear. The man who made Donald Trump is Donald Trump. See, there is no Karl Rove in Trump land. Donald Trump is a force of nature unto himself, a natural phenomena, his own phrase maker, his own speech writer, his own tweet master, his own press secretary, and most definitely his own strategist. It's true that I urged him to run for president as early as 1988, again in 2000 when I was the chairman of an exploratory committee, but he correctly concluded that one had to be either a Republican or a Democrat to get elected president. Yes, I wanted him to challenge Mitt Romney in 2012, and then of course I was delighted when he decided to run in 2016. There's some disagreement about how I left his campaign. He said he fired me. I say I quit. I'm right. But I continued to be an outspoken supporter and gave well over 100 surrogate speeches on his behalf, not to mention interviews and so on. I must tell you, though, that even I find his election victory improbable in the sense that virtually everything that I'd learned in American politics over a 40-year career, all the rules, all of the standard things that we think, appeared to be out the window. Here's a man who got nominated in the Republican primary and convention process without ever spending a nickel on a single poll. Here is someone who spent no money on focus groups, on analytics, on any instrument to tell him what to say in order to appeal to the American people. Also, a man who got nominated and essentially elected without spending hundreds of millions of dollars on broadcast television advertising or cable television advertising. Impossible, unthinkable, except he did it. Additionally, I would make the case to you that both the old media and the new media were rigged against him in the sense that, let's take Google, for example. Why would it be that a Donald Trump press release would be categorized as a promotion, but a Hillary Clinton press release would be categorized as an update? Well, that's the difference between millions and millions of opens. And then, of course, there is the constant drumbeat of criticism by the three major news networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, not to mention the two cable news networks. Now, you may remember that during the primary phase of the campaign, his opponents would complain that he was getting a disproportionate amount of coverage, particularly on Fox and CNN, when they could not get covered. And Trump himself made a bet that his set-piece rallies, where he did have thousands of people turning out, would be newsworthy, and that the cable news networks would cover them wall to wall, in essence becoming a multi-million-dollar paid television commercial. How could this be? I think I can explain it. You see, Trump was a man working without a net. You never know what he might say, so you had to tune in to find out what that could be. And that, in turn, is interesting. You see, the only thing in politics worse than being wrong is being boring. and Donald Trump is never boring. This is a rule I myself tried to follow. So because his campaign was interesting, it would command ratings. Because it commanded ratings, the cable news networks are able to charge more for their commercial advertising, so it was a win-win situation for everybody but Marco Rubio. Now, it's interesting to me that since his election, we have tried, not we, but the two-party duopoly that has run this country into the ground. Candidly, no one party working alone could screw things up this badly. And the two parties working together, at least the elite leadership of those parties, had given the country endless war without our inherent national interest being clear. The erosion of our civil liberties, the reading of our emails, our text messages, the collection of metadata. You may recall that the NSA advisor under Barack Obama, General Clapper, testified to the Congress that no, there is no metadata collection program in the country until, of course, Edward Snowden released the information that showed he was lying. Just in case you're wondering, General Clapper is now teaching ethics at Vermont College. We saw a process in which John Podesta, the chairman of the Clinton campaign, said the Electoral College should be given a briefing on Russian collusion before they voted. Well, that would have been the shortest briefing in American history because there is no evidence of Russian collusion. That be conspiracy, coordination, collusion with the Russian state to affect the outcome of the elections. But I have to give Mr. Podesta some credit for brilliance. What better way to distract from the fact that you and your brother got $38 million from oligarchs around Vladimir Putin than saying, oh, look over there at Donald Trump. It was a brilliant stratagem, and yet today, with hundreds of millions of dollars being spent by both the federal government, the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, the House and Senate Judiciary Committees, there is still no evidence of meaningful collusion with the Russian state to affect the election. I can understand this, though, because Hillary Clinton and her supporters spent somewhere around $2 billion on their electoral effort. They complained today, well, she won the popular vote. Really, did she and Bill not understand, having been through so many presidential campaigns, so many more than Donald Trump, that we don't go by the popular vote, we go by the electoral vote, and your strategy probably ought to be based on getting 270 electoral votes. We then had the recount. Now, I thought this was humorous because I wrote a piece for the Hill newspaper in which I opined that I had a concern about these computerized voting machines. You see, they really are just a simple computer, and with a $15 device that you could buy at Best Buys, they're pretty easily hacked and manipulated. And God, all hell broke loose. I was disrespecting the democratic system. I was a danger to democracy by raising this question. But then, after Donald Trump won, and you may remember Hillary kept goading him to say before the election that he would honor the outcome, that he wouldn't challenge the results of the election. In the end, it was she who challenged the outcome of the election, calling for recounts in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Now, the way recounts work, for those who don't know, is usually you file general objections, and then there's a time period in which you must come back and file specific objections. Essentially, the first act is a notification of your intention to ask for a recount, and then you got to put up or shut up. So what was the nature of her complaint in those states? You'll never guess. Why, it's that these computerized voting machines are easily hacked and manipulated. Net result of the recount, Donald Trump won all 3 states by a slightly larger margin than we had originally anticipated. So Plan B, the recount, that failed also. So now we moved on to the question of Russian collusion. Well, I told you the origins of that argument. Now, having spent 4 hours under oath in front of the House Intelligence Committee, an experience that I put up there with, say, a proctological exam as a life experience, I can tell you that I answered all the questions. I pled the fifth on nothing, and I told the committee with great detail that I know of no one in the Trump family, the Trump campaign, among the Trump associates who coordinated or colluded with the Russian state. No, I didn't know about the hacking of John Podesta's emails in advance. I never said I did. I did read in January of 2016 in the Panama Papers about all of the shady business dealings in Russia. There's the uranium deal, the bank deal, the gas company deal. Those were public matters. So when I said his time in the barrel would come, which I most definitely said, I was referring to this already public information. Knowing that Paul Manafort's business dealings in Eastern Europe had come under scrutiny, it was pretty obvious to me that John Podesta's business dealings in the region would also come under examination, as they later did. Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg News, and so on. No, I didn't know about the hacking of Hillary Clinton's email in advance. As Julian Assange from WikiLeaks said only yesterday in an interview, Roger Stone merely followed what I had said and posted and repeated it. In other words, everything I said on my Twitter feed, he had already said elsewhere. Yes, I can read. So this notion that I was, that had amazing precision and some heads up, some advance notice is demonstrably not true. And that is the basis for which I believe that my civil liberties were violated. Yes, I believe that there was a FISA court warrant to surveil my email, my text messages, my personal data, and we're going to use the courts to get to the bottom of that. What we see unfolding now in Washington really boggles the mind. You see, I lived through Watergate, and yes, I do have a tattoo of Richard Nixon on my back. We'll talk about that at the end, but I remember vividly what happened when 18 and a half minutes of the White House tapes went missing. The mainstream media and the Democrats went out of their minds. But now, when 50,000 text messages from the FBI go missing, well, that's no big deal. It's amazing to me to try to put this in some perspective that the Justice Department and the NSA under Barack Obama used what they knew was fabricated information to go to the court as the legal rationale for surveillance of the Republican candidate for President of the United States. Put another way, they used the authority and power of the state to spy on one of the two major candidates. Let's compare that with Watergate for a moment, in which 8 private individuals, misguided as they may have been, broke into the Watergate in an attempt to plant bugs that never really worked, and we now know at least 4 of them were still on the payroll of the Central Intelligence Agency and still reporting to their case officers. No, I'm afraid in comparison, this makes Watergate look like a milk-fed puppy. We are not at the end of this controversy. There is more to come. It was amazing to see Joe Scarborough denigrating Devin Nunes because he once worked as a dairy farmer. Could Joe Scarborough do a full day's work as any kind of farmer, maybe even a cane farmer? I rather doubt it. No, that's elitism, and it's offensive, if you ask me. I think Nunes has done his country a service. Now, on the other hand, I am one of those who believes that the Democrats' counter memo should most definitely be released. I believe in transparency. I think we should see it all. On the other hand, Adam Schiff, oh, what can I say? If it's Schiff, flush it. This guy is the most odious creep I have ever seen. He goes on RT and he calls for greater transparency in our FISA court system, yet he opposed the release of the information put out last week. He has backed and filled like there is no tomorrow. I'm most anxious to see his memo, but under all circumstances, we should see it. When I went to England last week, which was a great trip, took my grandson, had a terrific time, The food is really terrible, but the tailoring is very good, I must say. It was interesting that I did an interview with the BBC. You can see it today. Some people might call it combative. And the gentleman interviewing me actually said, you don't believe the highest level law enforcement and intelligence agencies in your own country? You're dangerous. And I said, no. You believe everything the government tells you? That's what's dangerous. And that's how I feel. The Guardian, the biggest newspaper in the country, had an editorial that said I should be censored. And that, I guess, is the most important point I want to make, because we reached a point in our political debate where there is no debate. Nobody wants to talk about dialogue or a debate. Let's get this out on the table. Everybody speaks their piece. No, if we disagree with you, you have to be censored. Well, the truth is, 2016 was the year in which the mainstream media lost their monopoly control on the political narrative. In the old days, when I first started in politics with Richard Nixon and later Ronald Reagan, that great patriot, Senator Bob Dole, George H.W. Bush, well, I regretted that, and then, of course, Donald Trump, there were only 3 networks until 2016, and if they didn't report something, well, it's essentially the same as it not happening. But with the technological advances of the fact that 50% of the people now getting their news through their handheld device or their iPad or their PC, and the fact that you've got to go through the internet to even watch television. Let's say you want to go because you're misguided and watch CNN. Not long before you find out there are better things to watch. Let's say, I don't know, Infowars.com. It has given rise to a vibrant, robust, choice-based alternative media, left, right, and center. More choices. Let people make up their own minds about what they like, what they believe, and what they want to watch. So what's happened now? Well, what we call the tech left, Yahoo, Twitter, Facebook, Amazon, they're trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube. Now suddenly there's a new policy at Facebook. They're going to decide what news you can watch instead of you deciding what news you can watch. They use shadow banning and manipulation of the algorithms to determine who gets to read what. You see the same act going on at Twitter. I, as you may have read, am banned for life at Twitter. At least until I sue the living hell out of them, but that's coming soon. The truth is, however, that this is a slippery slope. Censorship is a bad idea. I don't care if you are the most liberal Democrat or most conservative Republican or a member of the Green, Libertarian, or Vegetarian Party. You should have the same rights as everyone else to be heard and to read and see what you want. Censorship is the greatest danger to our democracy, not Roger Stone speaking to the BBC. So it is with those thoughts in mind that I thank you again for your kind invitation. I'm delighted to be here, and now let me finally address the question of the tattoo on my back. It's really not a political statement. It's not ideological at all. I mean, yes, I admire Richard Nixon because he reached a nuclear arms limitation agreement with the Soviets. He opened the door to China. He desegregated the public schools without bloodshed or violence. He saved the state of Israel from annihilation in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. He desegregated the trade unions. He launched the war on cancer. He gave us affirmative action. He increased 7-fold the Justice Department's funding for the enforcement of civil rights. He quadrupled the funding for black colleges. He also launched the ignominious racist failure that is the war on drugs, and he took us off the gold standard. He was a man of very great accomplishments, but like all human beings, he was also a man with flaws. But the tattoo on my back is not an ideological statement. It's not even a political statement. What it is a reminder that in life, when things don't go your way, when you are knocked down and you suffer defeats, when you're planning on something but you don't get it, when you're disappointed and dejected, that you have an obligation to get up off the canvas and get back into the game. The story of Richard Nixon is a story of resilience. It's a story of persistence. It's an American story. It was Nixon who said, "A man is not finished when he is defeated. He is only finished when he quits." Well, ladies and gentlemen, I will never quit. Thank you.